Hi, everyone. We're on Patreon. Find the link in the show notes. Show off your love for being curious with the official Info on the Go merch.
Whether you're sipping your coffee from our sleek mug, staying warm in one of our cozy hoodies, or rocking that fun fact inspired t shirt, or just carrying one of your essentials in our reusable tote bag, you'll be repping curiosity and style everywhere you go.
Each item is designed with our curious, on the go community in mind, and every purchase helps support the show. Wear it, sip it, carry it. Info on the Go is more than a podcast, it's a way of life.
Patreon, find the link in the show notes. Hi, I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and that makes this Info on the Go.
answering questions you want to know.
I say we just dive right into this one. What do you think?
Yeah, let's trade our information with the listeners.
I see what you did there. That was a pretty good job.
Trade surplus, deficits, and tariffs on this episode of Info on the Go.
First, as always, we need to explain what is trade. Trade generally refers to the voluntary exchange of goods or services between different economic actors.
It's a broad concept that can encompass various types of transactions from bartering for goods to buying and selling securities in financial markets.
Trade is essentially an exchange where one party gives something and receives something else in return, often with the goal of a mutual benefit. I think we talked a little bit about this in the history of money
Yeah, just a little bit.
because it kind of goes back to that trade and barter, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And trade is typically a voluntary transaction, meaning neither party is forced to participate.
Trade involves the transfer of tangible goods like products and intangible services like banking, healthcare, and whatever.
Domestic trade occurs within the borders of a single country.
While international trade is the exchange of goods and services across national borders, imports and exports.
Retail trade is sales of goods and services directly to consumers in small quantities.
Wholesale trade is buying and selling goods in large quantities, typically between businesses.
And barter trade, exchange of goods and services without using money.
E-commerce trade is trade conducted online through electronic platforms.
Trade fosters economic activity, encourages specialization and efficiency, and leads to increased productivity and innovation.
It allows for the efficient allocation of resources as countries and business can specialize in producing what they are good at and trade for other goods and services they need. So, in other words, let's talk in the scale of countries. So, if my country is, I can produce a lot of farm materials, but I really don't have enough steel, and your country does, then I can trade with you for some of my crops for some of your steel, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. Trade generates employment opportunities in various sectors from production to logistics to sales.
Increased access to goods and services, as well as technological advancements. These can improve living standards and overall quality of life.
Individuals trade every day around the world, buying groceries at the store, selling items online, and even trading baseball cards.
I had to throw that in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Business trade is a company purchasing raw materials from a supplier, selling its products to a retailer, exchanging services with other businesses.
Country and state trade is a country/state exporting agricultural products and importing manufactured goods, engaging in trade agreements to lower trade barriers.
Financial markets trade by buying and selling stocks, bonds, currencies, and other financial instruments.
Occupation or craft trade is a person's profession or skilled occupation like a carpenter or electrician.
What about a podcaster?
Podcaster, influencer,
I don't know if we influence anyone, you know, just curious minds, right?
yes.
In essence, trade is a fundamental aspect of human interaction and economic activity, enabling individuals, businesses, and countries to specialize, access goods and services, improve their overall well being.
But for this episode, we're exploring trading by countries or global trade in surplus and deficits.
Because it's what's in the news, right?
Right.
I guess here we will explain what a surplus is and what a deficit is for those listeners that may not know, right?
Right. A trade surplus occurs when a country exports more goods and services than it imports over a given period.
Okay. In other words, the total value of what a country sells to other nations exceeds the total value of what it buys.
And this surplus in trade results in a net inflow of money, strengthening a nation's economy and foreign exchange reserves.
Trade surpluses can be influenced by factors such as strong domestic industries, competitive pricing, high demand for a country's exports, or government policies that encourage production and trade.
Countries with consistent trade surpluses often benefit from increased employment, higher production levels, and economic growth.
However, a prolonged trade surplus can also lead to tensions in international trade, especially if other countries feel disadvantaged due to imbalances.
For example, if a country is exporting significantly more than it imports, its currency may appreciate in value due to higher demand, which can make future exports more expensive and less competitive globally.
Conversely, trading partners with trade deficits, where imports exceed exports, they might seek to rebalance trade relationships through tariffs or negotiations. But we want you to put a sticky note on that. We'll get back to that in a minute. You like the sticky note?
Yes. A
Okay.
trade deficit occurs when a country imports more goods and services than it exports over a given period.
This means that the total value of what a nation buys from other countries exceeds the total value of what it sells.
Sounds like a whole lot of going to the negative to me.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to get into deficits in a minute. You would think surpluses would be the negative, right? I mean, would be the positive, and deficits would be the negative.
Right. As a result, more money flows out of the country to pay more for imports than it comes in from exports.
So that's trade surpluses. Now let's get into trade deficits. They can arise due to various factors, including high consumer demand for foreign goods, reliance on imports for key resources, or economic policies that encourage purchasing from other nations. So let's just say that I'm country A and you're country B, and I can make, I don't know, a pen for $2, but I'll buy yours in for $1. And so yours is going to be cheaper than what mine is. So, that would be encouraging the import, right?
Right.
Okay.
While some view trade deficits as a negative indicator of an economy, they're not always harmful.
For example, they can allow countries to access products they do not produce efficiently, giving consumers and businesses more variety and potentially lower prices. Back to the pen, right?
Right. However, long term trade deficits can lead to challenges such as increased borrowing from other nations, currency depreciation, and reduced domestic industry competitiveness.
If a country consistently spends more on imports than it earns from exports, it might accumulate debt or face pressure to balance its trade by changing policies, adjusting tariffs, or investing in domestic production.
Now, let's look at that sticky note you had on tariffs.
So, a trade tariff is a tax that a government imposes on imported or exported goods. So, it works both ways, right?
Right. Tariffs are primarily used to regulate international trade, protect domestic industries, and generate revenue.
When a country places a tariff on imported goods, it makes those products more expensive for consumers, often encouraging people to buy from local businesses instead. So, in other words, my pen I'm selling for $2, right? I can make it and sell it for $2. I'm buying yours in for $1. So now I'm going to tax you $1 for your pen to make it equal to mine, right?
Right.
Or maybe I put a tariff on it for a buck 25 and make the domestic product cheaper than the imported product.
Right.
I mean, it really just depends on the country and how the currency is doing with trade.
Yeah.
But we're going to get into that a little bit later on as well, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This can help domestic industries compete with foreign companies by making imported goods less attractive due to higher costs.
Tariffs come in different forms.
A specific tariff is a fixed fee charged per unit of an item imported. such as a certain amount of tax per kilogram of wheat.
Ad valorem tariff, on the other hand, is a percentage of the item's value, meaning the more expensive the product, the higher the tariff applied.
Governments use tariffs strategically to influence trade relationships, balance deficits, and support key industries.
However, they can also lead to trade conflicts between countries.
If one country imposes high tariffs on imports, others may retaliate by doing the same, leading to economic tensions.
Additionally, tariffs can raise prices for consumers, making everyday goods more expensive.
I say we explore balance on trade theory.
Oh wow. That's going to be very interesting though, right? Because there's
Hmm.
multiple of those.
Absolutely.
So the balance of trade or BOT theory is a fundamental concept in economics that measures the difference between a country's exports and imports over a given period.
It is a key component of a nation's current account and reflects its economic health, trade competitiveness, and global standing.
A country has a trade surplus if it exports more than it imports, resulting in a positive balance of trade, whereas a trade deficit occurs when imports exceeds exports, leading to a negative balance of trade.
The idea of balancing trade dates back centuries, particularly in the mercantilist era of the 16th to 18th centuries.
Mercantilism and early economic theory emphasized that nations should maximize exports while minimizing imports to accumulate wealth, often measured in gold and silver.
Governments implemented protectionist policies such as tariffs, subsidies, and restrictive trade practices to achieve this goal.
However, with the rise of classical economics in the late 18th century,
Adam Smith and David Ricardo challenged mercantilism, arguing that free trade and comparative advantage more beneficial for long-term economic growth.
Ricardo's competitive advantage theory suggests that countries should specialize in producing goods they can make efficiently and trade them for other goods instead of seeking absolute self-sufficiency.
What are some factors affecting balance of trade?
Several elements influence a nation's balance of trade.
Exchange rates. If a country's currency depreciates, its exports become cheaper and more competitive globally, potentially improving its trade balance.
Trade policies. Governments can implement tariffs, quotas, or subsidies to influence trade balances, either protecting domestic industries or encouraging free trade.
Global demand and supply. Shifts in consumer preferences, technological advancements, and production capacities affect trade balances.
And resource availability. Countries rich in natural resources may maintain favorable trade balances due to strong commodity exports.
Economic growth and consumption. When an economy is booming, consumers and businesses may increase exports, leading to a potential trade deficit.
So, what are the impacts of trade surpluses and deficits?
Trade balances have broad economic implications.
A persistent trade surplus can boost a country's economy, increasing foreign exchange reserves, strengthening its currency, and fostering domestic job creation.
However, it can also lead to trade tensions as surplus nations may face criticism for currency manipulation or unfair trade practices.
A trade deficit, on the other hand, may indicate strong consumer demand and economic expansion, but prolonged deficits can pose risks such as growing national debt, currency depreciation, and dependency on foreign capital inflows.
Countries running large deficits may address them through fiscal policies, trade negotiations, or adjustments in currency valuation.
Keynesian theory, developed by John Maynard Keynes, emphasizes the importance of government intervention in the theory, particularly during economic downturns. Hey, I have a question for you. Did you ever watch the rap battle between Keynes and
Are you talking about the epic rap battles of history right now?
yeah, is that it?
Oh my god. That has like unlocked a core memory. That's so
I
funny.
Well, I mean, I that was my forte when I was in college was economics, right? Somebody sent that to me long after I was out of school, but I found it fascinating that these guys, these were both economists that wrote these, and I thought it was great. Epic,
I the
epic.
epic battles of history were
Okay.
just that. They were epic. Keynes challenged classical economic beliefs that markets naturally stabilize themselves and instead argued that aggregate demand and the total demand for goods and services in an economy drives economic activity.
Keynes' idea was particularly influential in international trade.
Towards the end of his life, he focused on balancing trade between nations, recognizing that both creditor and debtor countries contribute to global economic instability.
At the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, Keynes proposed the Keynes Plan, which suggested the creation of an international clearing union.
This would have established a global bank issuing a currency, the banker, to regulate trade imbalances.
I don't know how that would work because, right now we use I guess we haven't recorded it yet, but petroleum dollars. That's the world currency that's backed by the United States, right?
Right.
If you used a world currency, how would you have value on that note? Like, I don't understand how that would work. You would have to have the full backing of a country for to have a world currency.
Well, it would have to be many countries to back that same currency, yeah?
Yeah, but because that World Bank, like, I don't know. I guess maybe we'll save that for a future episode.
That's
Uh,
definitely
It's worth exploring later on, but we'll get back to trade for now.
okie doke.
Countries running trade surpluses would have been incentivized to reduce them, thereby helping deficit nations stabilize.
Although the plan was ultimately rejected, it reflected Keynes' belief that trade imbalances, especially surpluses, could harm global economic growth.
Keynes argued that nations with large surpluses depress global demand, creating economic stagnation.
He believed in regulated international trade over unrestricted free trade, advocating for policies that prevent excessive trade imbalances.
His views influenced post war economics, with many governments focusing on maintaining balanced trade.
However, since the end of the Bretton Woods system in 1971 and the rise of monetary schools of thought in the 1980s, Keynesian ideas on trade regulation have faded from the mainstream discussions.
Monetarist economists like Milton Friedman argued that trade deficits are not necessarily harmful and can indicate a thriving economy.
Friedman believed trade imbalances naturally correct themselves through currency valuation changes and investment flows.
While Keynes saw trade imbalances as a threat to prosperity, later economists like Friedman viewed them as a normal function of global economics, differing significantly in their perspectives on economic stability and government intervention.
Today, economists debate the importance of maintaining trade balance, with many advocating that free trade and globalization create long term benefits regardless of short term surpluses or deficits.
Organizations like the World Trade Organization, WTO, and trade agreements such as the United States Mexico Canada Agreement, better known as the USMCA, play critical roles in managing and facilitating international trade.
They help establish rules, resolve disputes, and create frameworks for fair and efficient trade among nations.
So, the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, is a global organization that governs international trade by creating and enforcing trade agreements between nations.
Established in 1995, it replaced the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, and now serves as the primary body for negotiating trade deals and settling trade related disputes.
The WTO promotes free trade by reducing tariffs, eliminating trade barriers, and ensuring fair practices among its member countries.
It also provides a dispute resolution system to help nations settle trade disagreements diplomatically.
With over 160 member countries, the WTO plays a major role in shaping global trade policies.
United States Mexico Canada Agreement, or the USMCA, which replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement in 2020, is a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada.
It aims to strengthen economic ties between these three countries by improving labor rights, reducing trade barriers, and updating regulations to reflect modern industries like digital trade and intellectual property protection.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This Mother's Day, give a gift that is truly special, one that captures memories, preserves love, and lasts for generations.
With tellmail.ai, you can turn your cherished memories into a timeless keepsake. It's simple. Each call unlocks new chapters, bringing to life the moments, laughter, and wisdom that defines your family's history.
After every conversation, Mel carefully transcribes and edits the stories into beautifully written memoir chapters, which can be shared with your family.
These chapters can be compiled into a stunning hardcover book or a digital keepsake, ensuring that your family's legacy is never lost.
This Mother's Day, give more than just a gift. Give the magic of storytelling, a legacy that will be cherished for generations. Start today at tellmail.ai. This May, Spirit of 76 Fireworks is lighting up the sky with purpose, introducing Power of Pink, a dazzling 25-shot cake that supports breast cancer awareness year-round.
While October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the fight never stops. That's why Power of Pink keeps the conversation alive and honors those affected every single day.
A portion of every Power of Pink sale goes directly to breast cancer research and supports organizations. So when you celebrate, you're also making a difference.
Light up the night, spark change, the power of pink, because awareness shines brighter when we stand together.
Find a retailer near you at 76fireworks.com. That's 76fireworks.com.
Key provisions include stricter labor laws, incentives for manufacturing within North America, and updated rules for digital commerce. The agreement has also helped streamline the flow of goods and services between these nations, reinforcing North American economic cooperation.
Both the WTO and the USMCA aim to create stability, fairness, and global trade. Though they operate at different levels, the WTO on an international scale, while the USMCA focuses mostly on North American countries.
In 2023, several nations maintained substantial trade surpluses, reflecting strong industrial output, resource exports, or advantageous global trade conditions.
China led the rankings with a staggering 593.9 billion surplus. This was primarily due to its dominance in manufacturing and exports across industries such as electronics, machinery, and consumer goods.
Germany followed with 249.9 billion, supported by its advanced automotive and machinery exports.
Ireland, with a 168.6 billion surplus, benefited from its pharmaceutical and tech industries, which saw substantial export growth. I did not know that Ireland was big on pharmaceuticals.
Me either, till just now.
Yeah, hey, you should do your factoid thing there.
A factoid.
There you go.
Singapore recorded 154.8 billion, largely driven by its financial services, electronics exports, and strategic location as a global trade hub.
Resource-rich countries also appeared high on the list, such as Saudi Arabia with 126.9 billion and Russia's 121.6 billion. Both of these countries rely heavily on oil and gas exports.
Switzerland, with 124.9 billion, maintained its surplus through its strong pharmaceutical and financial sectors.
See, I would have thought Switzerland was bigger in the financial sectors and not the pharmaceutical part of it.
Right, same.
Latin America's largest economy, Brazil, posted 92.3 billion, largely due to exports of agricultural products and minerals.
I can
And
see that.
this is largely driven by domestic demand for imported goods such as electronics, oil, apparel, and automobiles. And China has one of the precious metals that they export more than anything else that's used for electronics. What is that?
Tungsten?
Yeah. So, I mean, we should definitely do an episode on, and I know we say that on every episode, but we should definitely do one on precious metals
Oh, for sure. In addition
because,
to our gemstones.
oh yeah, yeah. For sure.
For sure, for sure.
For sure.
Despite having a strong export sector, particularly in industries like technology and agriculture, the U.S. consistently imports more than it exports.
This imbalance has raised debates over policies aimed at reducing dependence on foreign goods and improving manufacturing competitiveness.
Japan, known for its strong export economy, also experiences trade deficits at times.
Although it exports high value goods such as automobiles, electronics, the country relies on imports for energy, food, and raw materials.
Japan's trade balance often fluctuates based on global commodity prices and shifts in manufacturing competitiveness, with trade surpluses in some sectors balancing deficits in others.
While Germany is famous for its export-driven economy, especially in machinery and automobiles, it also runs trade deficits with certain nations.
This is primarily due to high import demands for energy, consumer goods, and raw materials.
Germany's strong industrial base generally keeps its economy competitive, but trade imbalances with Pacific partners remain a factor in its overall trade landscape.
The United Kingdom frequently runs trade deficits due to high import levels in sectors such as food, technology, and manufacturing.
Brexit and global trade shifts have impacted the UK's trade balance, prompting discussions on improving domestic production and adjusting trade agreements to mitigate long-term deficits.
Beyond these major economies, Turkey, France, the Philippines, and Spain also experience trade deficits driven by high consumer imports or limited domestic production capacity in certain industries.
Many developing nations run trade deficits as they rely on imports for industrial and technological growth while struggling to maintain strong export sectors.
While trade deficits can sometimes indicate economic challenges, they are not inherently harmful.
A strong economy may still thrive with a deficit if it attracts foreign investment, fosters innovation, and maintains competitive industries. This is one of those Econ 101 things that you learn in economics, first off and foremost. But I still found this very interesting.
For sure.
Did you
Um,
gain anything out of it? Is economics even your forte?
I had an economics class. I find that us being trillions dollars in debt is kind of abhorrent.
Well, the
Um,
trade deficit and the national deficit are two things, but they are connected.
right, right. I do think that here in the US we should look at doing things locally. However, there are some local businesses that could be better too, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it all goes to, for me, it goes back to trade. Like if my pen, me and you were trading pens again, my pen has a higher quality than your pen. Even though your pen's cheaper, I'm more likely going to sell my pen because of the quality, right?
Right. Right, exactly.
Well, for me, I think that, when we get into talk about trade deficits and trade surpluses, I think if you want to be competitive, you have to be innovative and create a product that people want to buy. It doesn't matter if you're trading it or importing or exporting. If your product is superior, it's going to be the one that consumers gravitate to.
Right. Exactly.
That's pretty much all I've got, Kat.
Me too. If you would like to support this podcast,
Click the support link or Patreon links in the show notes.
William and I want to thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Join the Facebook group at Info on the Go
Share with us your show ideas.
or ask us a question.
Subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcast.
Send us a text using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
Email us at,
Info on the Go podcast at gmail.com.
yes, that is all one word. Till next time.
Stay curious.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by ChatDoc. It is an AI powered tool designed to help users interact with documents using natural language. It allows you to upload PDFs and other document formats.
You can chat with them to extract key information, summarize content, and analyze details efficiently. With ChatDoc, you can click on any word in the AI generated answer to jump to the cited sentence.
So, Kat and I love to use ChatDoc when we're writing our episodes because we're able to share information. But not only that, we're able to cite the information that we're actually putting in to make sure that it is valid information,
Right, exactly. Verify.
verified. So, check it out at ChatDoc.